Welcome to the Disrupting Obesity podcast. I'm Charlotte Skanes, and I'll be sharing ways to regain control over your body and lose an extreme amount of weight naturally. Being fat is about so much more than just the food. It's about your relationship with food. That means that dealing with your weight is about more than just the food, too. You have to change that relationship. You have to start disrupting obesity. We're neck deep in our Ask Whatever summer, and the questions just keep getting better, guys, so please keep sending them in. I'll send you an answer as soon as I can, and then I'll expand on that later on one of these episodes. Our next episode is a super special one that you flamingos asked for, and I thought about it, and then I just said, why not? But we'll come back to that later. Today, we have 6 new questions, including one from our dear friend Gladys. Before I can do anything else, though, I need to talk about Richard. I have no idea how. I found out about it from you guys. It had been his birthday on the Friday, and I'm talking about Richard Simmons, just to be clear. And then on Saturday, he was gone. We were at our best friend's house with the boys, and my phone just started blowing up with messages from you guys. And it's heart-stopping when you pick up your phone and there's message after message after message just saying, I'm sorry, over and over again. So it took me a minute to figure out what was going on. And when I did, I was kind of just gutted. I do trend towards the melodramatic, and I just ended up on my knees on the deck too just stunned even really to do much of anything but sob. A little later, I turned to my bestie and said that I just couldn't think of another celebrity whose death could rock me like that. And it would be one thing if he was still basically in seclusion, but he wasn't. He had all these marvelous plans that he was sharing on Facebook and Clubhouse, and he was the highlight of so many people's days again, including mine. I mean, I earned that top fan badge on Facebook because his posts were just a ray of sunshine. And I sought them out and treasured the stories that he shared. It was joy, just joy every day. I don't know how to express what he meant to me, but I know it's the same for so many of you. But here's a story that comes from something that happened on my YouTube channel. A question came in. I think it was on a video from one of the podcast episodes from before where I talked about Richard. And this person asked me who my other heroes were, who were the other people who inspired me in this space. And I thought about it. Like, I seriously thought about it for more than a week. Like, I sat down every day and I tried to answer that question. And after a week, I just had to go back and say that there was nobody. He was just unmatched. And it's been more than a month and I still feel that way. Sometimes there can only be one. I think this is one of those times. But thank you so much to everybody who's reached out. It's been amazing hearing your memories and your reasons why you loved him and your stories of the times that you got to meet him. I for sure wish I had one of those stories to share, but I'm delighted to hear yours. Remember Richard and be kind. All right, let's get to it and let's get started on this week's new questions. So what if I don't do intermittent fasting or choose less limiting hours? That's cool. It doesn't matter when you eat, so long as you're in a deficit. Calories can't tell time. And you've kind of touched on something with your question when you asked about less limiting hours. Everybody is doing some form of intermittent fasting anyway. All of us. Nobody eats the full 24 hours each day. We all have to take time off just to sleep at some point. So if you're hung up on the formality of it, you can let that go. You're already doing it. This could be a perspective thing. Intermittent fasting works for weight loss because for some people, it forces a calorie deficit. If someone's used to eating from like 7 a.m. to midnight and they start eating from 7 to 7, they're cutting out not just a bunch of time, but they're cutting out the eating that they normally do during that period. That's how intermittent fasting can be successful without calorie tracking. The issue is when cutting out that time spent eating doesn't force the deficit. Given how easy it is to eat a whole bunch of calories in a very short period of time, intermittent fasting isn't going to put everybody into a deficit automatically, which can be super frustrating, especially if when you start out, you pick an eating window that's radically different to what you're used to. So let's use that example from just a minute ago. If you're eating from 7 in the morning until midnight, and I don't mean continuously, I mean, you could eat at any point in that window. What you're doing is a 7-17. You're fasting for 7 hours and you're eating for 17. It's going to be pretty hard if you suddenly go with like a 12-12, right? Which is what eating from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. would be. 12 hours of eating and 12 hours of not eating. That's an unsustainable jump. It's too big. You're way better off moving to an 8-16 and working your way in from there. You don't just need to make incremental changes with food. You can do it with other things too. Tightening up your eating window is a good place to take a look. It's probably not going to force a calorie deficit in the same way that a more radical shift would, but it will still make getting into one easier. More importantly, you're less likely to give up. If it's easier to keep going, you're more likely to keep going. If you can't do whatever you want to do for long enough to get all of your weight off, and you're telling yourself that, oh, you're just going to find another solution midstream, you're not setting yourself up for success. Like if you think you can do keto for the first 60 pounds, maybe you'll probably burn out. So you'll switch it up and start doing raw food. Whatever. The diets themselves don't matter. Pick any two. I could have said South Beach and carnivore or paleo and Weight Watchers. It doesn't matter what you pick because they're all about the deficit anyway. And the larger point is that if you're not finding success with one extreme plan because you're burning out, switching to another extreme plan isn't going to lead to less burnout. Intermittent fasting can be extreme, but it doesn't have to be. And you don't have to go whole hog for the dog right off the bat. You can and you should start slowly. And there's nothing saying that you have to end up with a 16-8. If you're used to having a 17-hour long eating window, shifting that down to 14 or 15-hour eating window is a win. It's also a sustainable change that could lead to more sustainable changes. Intermittent fasting doesn't have to be limiting. It definitely doesn't have to feel limiting. You can choose windows that work for you. You can use it as a tool, like a safety net, to give yourself the mental space to work on your relationship with food. How much did you lose and how long did it take with diet alone? So I lost 201 pounds and it took me 2.5 years almost with diet alone. It took the whole time with just diet. I didn't exercise at all to lose my weight. And I don't think I've gone off on one of these rants for a while. So Gladys's, you might want to put on your earmuffs. You don't have to exercise to lose weight. No matter how much you have to lose, exercise is completely unnecessary to lose weight. Is it helpful? Sometimes. I'm going to argue that it isn't helpful with weight loss if all exercising makes you feel is so discouraged that you don't want to keep going. I'm also going to argue that if you're not used to exercising and you're obese, you should take it very slowly and you should probably get some expert advice, because if you hurt yourself, you're going to struggle to be able to keep going with anything having to do with weight loss, not just the exercise part. There's also a couple of mindset pitfalls that you're going to want to avoid here. First off, don't add calories back. No matter how many your fitness tracker says that you burned, don't do it. I can't go off on the inaccuracy rates of fitness trackers and the whole concept of exercise for weight loss. We don't have time today. But I did go off on it in episode 54, which was Ask Whatever number 12. Okay, so that's one thing. Here's another thing. When we exercise, especially when it's something we're not used to doing, we start to feel entitled to more food. It's super dangerous. Entitlement can be a very powerful force. We're super motivated when we feel entitled to something, which might be okay if exercise actually burned as many calories as we tend to think it does, but it doesn't. Google how long you have to do various exercises, right, to lose weight. You're going to be absolutely shocked. Just Google how long you have to walk to burn 100 calories, or how long you have to jump rope, or whatever. Insert whatever you like. You'll be shocked. Or you could just go listen to episodes 9 or 40. They are called Don't Exercise to Lose Weight and Stop Exercising to Lose Weight. It turns out that both of those titles are enough to mobilize the Happy Bottom Brigade. The Gladyses get their fingers tapping real quick. It was pretty spectacular. You'd think that I was telling people to light their hair on fire to lose weight, right? The way these people got going. Anyway, I learned a new word this week. Rage baiting. Now, I don't know how I missed this because I looked it up and it's been around for a while. I thought it was like skibbity or yeet. And I can't tell you how much I love those words, even though I know that I'm too old to use them and maintain my dignity. Um, but rage baiting isn't new as a concept or as a word. I'd heard of another kind of baiting where they try to make you feel sad, but it's called something else, and I can't think of what it was. It was like sympathy bait or something. If you know what it is, please comment or reach out and let me know, because this is driving me absolutely crazy. I also think it's kind of awful that clickbait needs subcategories, but here we are. Um, but I learned about the rage bait thing because of the Playdate bill situation, which I realize that's already old news. But if you haven't seen it, a couple of moms went viral with these posts that they created. One of them even tagged the post as satire, but people still went off the deep end. And they were saying that they wanted to normalize asking other parents to chip in when their kids came over for a play date. One of them wanted $15 to cover things like 3 pumps of hand soap, and there was a charge for wear and tear on the sofa. And yeah, people still thought this was a real thing, and they lost their minds. I am not rage baiting when I talk about not needing to exercise to lose weight. The Gladys rage is just a happy byproduct. I don't talk about this for them. I talk about it for all the people who feel like I did when I had the weight to lose. I was terrified. I was uncoordinated and very easily winded. I hated exercise passionately. I had very serious 80s gym class trauma. I had the same gym teacher for 2 out of my 3 years in middle school. And that was back when they used to split the boys and the girls up for huge chunks of the year. She wasn't a bad person, and she wasn't a bad gym teacher. If you were good at gym, even a little bit good at gym, you didn't have to be great at it. You just had to put in an effort and like have a decent attitude about it, because she was old school. By the time I got there, she'd been running the same program for about 25 years. And boy, oh boy, was it ever a lot of fun if you were uncoordinated and overweight like I was. It felt like torture to me. There were fitness drills and lots of running around the block, and she had a stopwatch. And if you didn't do it fast enough the first time, she'd make you do it again, which always seemed so counterproductive to me, because if I couldn't do it fast enough the first time, I don't know how she could reasonably expect that I'd be any faster the second time around. But we had to do a fitness drill where you had to throw a tennis ball against the wall and catch it as many times as you could. First with your right hand, and then with your left hand, and then from your left to your right, and back and forth, right? 3 minutes each. No, 3 minutes total, 1 minute each. Just 3 minutes of torture. But in that time, I managed to catch the ball 4 times. Not around 4 times, not 4 times-ish. It was 4 times total. The whole thing is just seared in my brain. And I know that I'm not the only one with these kinds of incidents burned into their brain, right? Which is exactly why I keep saying that you don't have to exercise to lose weight. You can lose 100% of your weight without a single anything that even remotely resembles exercise. And there's no bait and switch here. I'm not just about to tell you that you don't have to exercise, but you should definitely get your steps in. No, there is no but. You don't have to exercise to lose weight, but you don't have to exercise to lose weight. I can say it, I can frame it the other way around too. You can lose weight without exercise. All of your weight. I lost 201 pounds, right? Completely without it. I gained about 115 pounds back almost 10 years later. And then I lost that, also without exercise. And now there are thousands and thousands of flamingos in 105 different countries, all doing it too, eating whatever they want, just less of it, not exercising, and just pissing off Gladyses everywhere. Did you get discouraged on your weight loss journey, and how did you handle it? For sure. I had 200 pounds to lose. It'd be hard not to get discouraged at some point. And it's not like I had a steady, consistent march from 338 to 137. It was not a straight line. Once I got going, I knew I could do it. But I definitely had times where I felt discouraged. Losing a lot of weight is really hard. I handled it by reminding myself that the only way out is through. I had to keep going. I really hated being fat. I hadn't truly been a healthy weight since I was about 8 years old, and I didn't want to be fat anymore. The second time that I lost weight, the last time, I knew that I could do it because I'd already done it. And yeah, I know I gained back more than half of my weight, but I had kept it off for 9 years, 9.5 years actually, before I put any of it back on. To be discouraged means to lose the courage to continue. And that's a very scary place to be. I reminded myself of how far I'd come and how badly I didn't want to do it again. Acknowledging how hard what I was doing was made it easier to bear and easier to keep going, because it wasn't like sunshine and good times losing the weight, right? Yeah, I ate whatever I wanted. And yes, eating at night is my most favorite time to eat. That didn't mean it was easy. It just means I made it as easy on myself as I could by leaning into what I wanted and doing what I knew I was capable of. I knew I couldn't eat the same thing over and over again for as long as it was going to take to lose 200 pounds. I couldn't do it. I knew I couldn't cut out carbs or, switch to shakes and juice. Like, it wasn't going to happen. Since I knew I couldn't sustain anything radical enough to drop a lot of weight consistently, I knew it was going to take a while to get the weight off. 200 pounds at 1.5 pounds a week, which is, the good average, that's 133 weeks. It's a fairly long time. I ended up doing it at a rate of 1.55 pounds a week, and I cut it down by a little bit, but I knew what I was in for. Managing my expectations in that way really helped. I mean, you can hope and wish all day long, but your mindset is pretty critical when it comes to weight loss. And if you're hoping and wishing that you'll lose like 5 pounds a week and have this all wrapped up in a few months, you might be setting yourself up for some very serious disappointment here. Because let's say that you've got 105 pounds to lose, okay? And you really want to lose it in 5 months. All you have to do is lose a little more than 5 pounds a week. Okay, let's roll on it. We're just going to roll on it. What happens when you get to the point that you know mathematically that you're not going to make it? Let's say that you're on week 14, okay, and you're at 40 pounds down instead of the 70 that you thought you would have lost by then, right? That's a lot of ground to make up in 6 weeks. You're losing almost 3 pounds a week, which is an incredible pace, but you've still got 65 pounds to go. You need to somehow go from losing 2.86 pounds a week to losing 10.83 pounds a week to hit that goal, right? Of 105 pounds in 5 months. But the math just isn't mathing anymore. You're not going to make it. That is a very tricky thing to handle. Once you start to slide, once you know you're not going to make it across the finish line when you wanted to, how do you cope with that psychologically? How do you keep yourself going when you feel like you're letting yourself down? When you feel like you've already failed? What's the point? It starts to get really hard to manage your mindset, to keep it in check and keep yourself into a positive headspace. It feels a lot better to surprise yourself with how well you're doing. You've got 105 pounds to lose. At 1.5 pounds a week, that's 70 weeks. And I understand that can sound awful. It's also one of the big reasons that my program is 53 weeks long. Losing a significant amount of weight takes a significant amount of time, and it's complicated, and you need to have support as you work your way through the weight. 70 weeks, that's almost 1.5 years, which is a lot to stare down. But the time's going to pass whether you're doing something about your weight or not. So don't let the time it's going to take discourage you. Use it to help you set reasonable expectations for yourself so you don't get discouraged later. Because it feels hard now, right? You're likely going to have some moments along the road that are going to feel even harder. But your bravery is going to build too. You're going to teach yourself that you can do it by doing it. There is a specific subset of Gladys. Some of them really niche down. These ones are the fruit demonizers, and I've talked about them before. This isn't the first time that they've come for me, and I'm really fine with it because I like pushing back against this particular breed of horse shit. No one was more surprised than me when I had a handful of recipe videos do really well. I've even got a few with over 1 million views, and the cake mix brownies are they're almost at 8 million. It was pretty shocking, and it kind of is. But one really popular one is my pineapple fluff. It's crazy simple, and as the name implies, it contains pineapple. Yummy, yummy pineapple. The recipe also has Cool Whip and a sugar-free pudding mix. So I gave the Gladyses a lot to work with on this one. And they all came out with their torches blazing. This Gladys, though, this specific Gladys, wasn't upset about the chemicals. And she wasn't even generally angry about the Cool Whip. She goes, and this is a direct quote, "But isn't pineapple, along with the syrup, full of sugar?" And then she hit me with a super passive-aggressive shrug emoji. If you're listening and not watching, I really hope you can hear my eyes rolling. Come on, Gladys. That pudding mix has God knows what in it. Cool Whip is made out of seed oils, and you're going to take exception to the pineapple. Pineapple? Seriously? Fruit isn't evil, and neither is sugar. Why are we demonizing fruit? With all the high fructose garbage pseudo food just waltzing around out there, and we're going to get our knickers in a knot about fruit. What the fuck is going on? Fruit isn't the problem. The pineapple isn't even the highest calorie ingredient in this recipe. That's the Cool Whip. And it's not a high calorie ingredient either, please. I mean, the entire batch for this recipe, the whole batch clocks in at just over 600 calories. So none of it is high calorie. It's 605 calories for all of it, for the whole dessert. So it's not a high calorie food in the context of significant weight loss. I could have eaten 4 batches of it and still had calories to play with for the day when I started losing weight. I mean, I get it. I do get it. I am a diabetic. I have a super rare kind, but you know what? I still count. I have to watch my sugar, including the fructose that we get from fruit. But this is sugar in its most natural state. We're talking about fruit, and I'm having a very hard time hating on it here. You want to hear me go off on a sugar? Let's circle back to high fructose corn syrup, and I could rage and rail against that for the next half hour. We could dive into the ways that the corn subsidies and the low-fat craze drove high fructose corn syrup's dominance, or how the fact that it's, half the price of regular sugar, and that drove both the food manufacturers' use of it and their profits through the roof. You want to talk about the differences between the way our bodies use and store glucose versus fructose? Sure, we can do that too. But demonizing fructose because we store it in our livers, if that's what your shrug is driving at, if you're diving into the science, I'm right there with you. Let's go. But blaming the fructose in fruit for the larger obesity crisis instead of high fructose corn syrup? I mean, it's right there in the name, for crying out loud. Blaming the fructose in fruit instead of high fructose corn syrup is like blaming sugar alcohols in food for alcoholism instead of blaming booze. You're just missing the whole point on so many levels. Mostly the level of my recipe. The point of the pineapple fluff is to have an alternative to eating something with a whole lot more calories. It's about being able to eat a whole bunch of something and to not have to worry about blowing your calories for the day, right? It's volume eating. It's a mindset thing. It's a relationship with food thing. And the Gladyses just don't get that. Can you talk about regain? Yes. Regain is definitely something I can speak to. I gained back about 115 pounds. But it's not just me. It's about 85% of everybody who loses weight. I thought I'd beaten the odds because most people who lose weight, 85% of them, gain it back within 5 years. I didn't. I went nearly double that, and I kept it off for 9.5 years. But I did beat the odds in one way. That 85% who gain it back also gain an average of 25% more than their starting weight. I didn't. I got lucky. So, well, that's a funny way of saying that I became catastrophically ill and almost died a bunch. Yeah. So most people gain their weight back. Nobody is alone on this one. I've got a theory on why this happens. I believe the recidivism rate is so high because we focus on the food. And it's not about the food. It's about your relationship with food. But we focus just on what we're eating. We cut out food groups and eat the same thing over and over again. We restrict ourselves to the point of oblivion, and we try to walk away from the foods we know and love. We tell ourselves we can keep going even when it's questionable at best and definitely unhealthy at worst, but unquestionably unsustainable. And before you know it, we're telling ourselves we can't do it. And then the narrative starts to become that you're failing. You failed again, and you didn't. It wasn't meant to be sustained. It's a similar problem with regain. You feel like you failed, and you didn't fail. You weren't ever given the tools to keep your weight off. You learned how to do whatever it took for you to get it off, but without having done the work on your relationship with food. It was all about the food. And obesity isn't about food. It's about what's going on in your head when you're thinking about food and when you're eating it. It's about the reasons behind your choices and the patterns you can't see because you haven't looked for them. Losing weight is one thing and keeping it off is another. And regain is directly related to the gap in the conversation between those two things. Some of us are talking about the shame and the feelings that go along with regain and even the reasons why it happens. I made a choice. I chose food in the face of almost unbearable pain. I knew I was going to gain weight and I didn't care. I decided I was going to deal with the weight later. But regain happens for as many reasons as there are feelings, good ones and bad ones. We need to talk about the mindset you need to have to keep yourself from gaining the weight back. And that starts with how you lose your weight and the work you do on your mindset while you're doing it. I keep trying to find ways to distill it down and find a straightforward explanation, but it's really hard to be concise when it's a topic that I spend 53 weeks teaching in the program. You have to be prepared to live in your body when you get to a healthy weight, and you have to know how to manage your calories. I'm down 35 pounds. I've got 85 to go. I've been stuck for 3 weeks and I'm starving. Right off the hop, congratulations on the 35 pounds. That's a pretty big deal. But I know how hard it can be to keep yourself going, especially when you're not seeing it on the scale. The only thing you can do is keep going, which is really hard to do, again, when that scale isn't moving, and it's even harder to do when you feel like you're starving. I've talked about plateaus a few times fairly recently. You can check out the other Ask Whatevers for more on that. So today I'm going to focus on the feeling like you're starving part. We're going to assume that you're tracking what you're eating. The first thing you're going to want to do is double check your TDEE, your total daily energy expenditure. Not to make sure that you're eating enough calories, you must be, or you'd be losing weight. No, you're going to check to make sure that your app is accurate and you can see how many calories you need to be taking in. You want to eat 500 calories less than your maintenance TDEE. If you feel like you're starving, remind yourself of what you've already eaten. You're not actually starving. And you should know too that starvation mode is a myth. It's actually a very offensive myth, and it pisses me off every single time I see somebody talking about it and using it to sell a product or to make someone feel better or worse about themselves. Starvation mode is a myth. At no point in human history have people suddenly stopped losing weight and started holding on to fat when we've taken away all of their food. It's never happened. There is no such thing as eating so few calories that your body starts to retain its fat. So don't worry about that. Let's take a look at some stuff that will help, like finding lower calorie versions of your favorites so that you can eat more of them. Learning to bulk up on foods that are high in volume but lower in calories, stuff like popcorn. Try moving your calories around. How do you feel if you eat most of your calories before 5 p.m. versus after 5 p.m.? What happens if you stop having a huge breakfast and start having a bigger lunch? There are very tangible things that you can do to get the scale moving again. On the abstract side of things, you need to do the mindset work to keep yourself focused and moving forward. Even if the scale isn't moving, your mindset needs to. You're down 35 pounds. You've got a lot of wins just racked up, right? You can and should be focusing on those wins, reminding yourself of them, using them to build yourself up when you're tempted to start tearing yourself down. Like attracts like. Focusing on positive things brings more positive things into your life. Keep looking forward and thinking about the things that you're excited to do when you get to a healthy weight or on your way to a healthy weight. You don't need to hit your goal on the scale to start trying to do the things that you want to do, the things that you want to try. I was capable of stuff when I was still 100 pounds from my goal weight. there were things I could do that helped me to stay excited and focused on the things that I was going to be able to do as I lost more and more weight. Your self-talk in these moments is critical. It feels catastrophic when the scale isn't moving, but you have to try and stay focused on your capability. You know you can do it because you've been doing it. You're not the same person that you were when you started. Nobody loses weight in a straight line. It's more than okay to have ups and downs. It's completely normal. Success lies in the way you handle it. And the way you handle it is going to be based on what you're telling yourself. If you tell yourself you can't do it, it's going to be a lot harder than if you say you can. And I'm in no way suggesting that you try and bury your feelings of frustration and disappointment. I'm saying acknowledge that those feelings are there. They're totally normal feelings to have. But tell yourself that you know you're going to get through it. And I'll help in any way that I can. I'm building a library of answers to all of these questions as we speak, and I'm trying to find ways to keep making things easier for you. You can download a copy of my free guide to getting started for the last time. My weight loss workbook is available on Amazon, and if you're looking to go hardcore, there's the program. Keep trying, keep tracking, don't be intimidated, and don't give up. You've totally got this. Thank you for listening to Disrupting Obesity with Charlotte Skanes. If you know it's time to take back control, lose the weight, and keep it off, reach out to me privately with a direct message on Instagram that says ready, so you can start disrupting obesity.